Hello, can everyone hear me okay, or do I need to bring the mic closer? Closer? All right. How's this? Would you like a really nice, comforting idea? Okay, so I'm going to project as good as possible as well, just because I'm a loudmouth. So welcome to Social Forensication. This is a multidisciplinary approach to social engineering. What that means is we are going to take concepts that are not typically regarded as social engineering and use them for social engineering. Before we get started, the thoughts and opinions I express are mine and not IBM's. I say that because that's where I'm a senior security architect. About me, I'm the 2017 DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag winner. My team, the Password Inspection Agency, got third place last year at the NOLACon OSINT CTF. I write for Forbes from time to time. I haven't written this month, but when I have time, I do. And I'm doing OSINT training as well. So I don't take the black badge out of the house, but that's what it looks like. It blinks, and it's really blinky. Picture from the closing ceremony. So anyone who knows me knows that I never shut up, but I was rendered speechless that day. So it is what it is. So basically, with this talk, I want to talk about very briefly the basics of social engineering. We're not going to get too in the weeds on that just because, I mean, we got a lot to cover with this. And we'll discuss a little bit about the existing attacks that we deal with like USB devices, and then talk a little bit about Wi-Fi access points, and then considerations, and then mitigation, all that fun stuff too. So to get into it, the basics of social engineering, basically it is human hacking. You are trying to use influence, not manipulation, which indicates malice, to influence your target to say or do something they shouldn't do. Provide you a piece of information or perform an action. That could be click this link, open this file. If I'm going to go ahead and start digging in on salespeople because I loathe salespeople for the most part. I apologize for any salespeople in here. Save your applause. Save your applause. But anyway, oh, you're not the person that makes the decision to buy this product? Can you tell me who is? That is part of social engineering. It's giving you a piece of information. You're not the person to do it? Okay, I'm sorry that you're the little man. Can you tell me who the big dog on campus is? I want to talk to him or her. So going that route. It could be something as complicated as opening up a firewall port. Think of what would happen if port 4444 was opened to the public internet. I mean, 4444 could do some harm. 445 could do a lot more harm. 139 wouldn't be bad. Sorry, I'm working on my OSCP right now, so port numbers are just like, it's a blur right now in that regard. So anyway, that's basically what we're trying to do. So in terms of types of social engineering, we hear a lot about phishing. Phishing is probably the #1 vector of social engineering because it's cheap and it works. It's cheap in the regard of all you need is a compromised account or stand up your own insecure SMTP server and have at it. So in that sense, it is probably the most prevalent. Phishing, that's pretty popular as well. That's when you're actually using your voice to phish. So you're spoofing numbers, you're calling people, you're telling them, hey, as a byproduct, one of my favorite pretexts, I use it very frequently. Hi, I'm sorry, my name is John Doe, and I'm a contractor. I've been hired by the CIO. We're doing a survey because we've got an external audit coming up. And the last time we did this audit, we got caught with our pants around our ankles. And the CIO was livid. So the CIO is tasked, and you're going to know the CIO's name. You're going to say, Donna Summers is the CIO. And, well, Miss Summers, she's furious. And, I mean, if we end up in that situation again this year, heads are going to roll. So I want to make sure everything is accurate, up to date, ahead of time. So, and here comes the most important phrase, can you please help me? The actual 4 most important words to social engineering is can you help me? But I like to throw a please in just, for decency's sake. And that typically works because people, they don't want to get in trouble. They want to be helpful. They want to do something, you're coming from a position of perceived authority. They're going to give you this information. You can ask them almost anything. I've been a consultant for Nielsen, the company that used to do TV ratings. I've used that as a pretext before, and I straight up asked people, hey, what's your password? And people gave me the answer. But I always prefaced it with, I didn't come up with this list of questions, so I apologize if you're not comfortable answering anything. If you choose not to answer it, that's okay. I'll just make a note of it, and nothing bad will happen to you. And then people still, buttermilk, Bubbles 14. That was the same user, actually. So anyway, we're going to focus a lot on the physical side of it, but also know that there's dumpster diving and baiting. So with that, if you want to look at the complexity of social engineering, for anyone who's trying to get into social engineering and trying to take a more academic approach, these are the 5 things I recommend. Something along the lines of InfoSec, computer science, something there. It never hurts if you're able to script something that could help with your OSINT, that could help with scripting your phish, all the way up to exploit development, which could help with your malicious payloads you want to drop. I don't care who you are. If you're in this industry, you're going to do technical writing. That's just, it is what it is. Get used to it. The more writing you do, the better you're going to get at it. But you definitely need some improv, because when you're on those phishing calls, it's like tap dancing. It reminds me of a cartoon I watched as a kid, and it was Betty Boop. And she got abducted by these savage, I guess, rednecks. I don't know. I'm from Tennessee, so I can use that term. And they wanted her to dance. And they're like, you need to dance. And she's all like, no. And then they keep yelling at her. And eventually they start shooting guns at her feet so that she'll start dancing to dodge the bullets. And that's kind of what phishing calls are like. Because you're trying to extract information from your target, but at the same time, the end game is you don't want them asking a bunch of questions to you, because when they start asking questions, you have to be able to respond like that. Because you don't, if it's something that you're not lying about, you're gonna be able to say it without pause. If you're having to recall or think up your lie, that's gonna take some time. It's gonna ruin your credibility. So improv, acting, you need to get in character and stay in character. Psychology. Well, that's because it's human hacking. Speaking of psychology, here's Dr. Robert Cialdini's 6 Principles of Persuasion. This is from the book Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And back to my stance against car salesmen, specifically, not just salespeople, car salesmen especially. It's easy to explain these concepts with that. So starting out, scarcity, also known as urgency. Hey, you know, this car here, it's great. But I'm just going to let you know, there was a guy, he was just here looking at it. He went down the street to the bank. If he can get financed for it before you, it's his. But if you can beat him to it, it's yours. I actually had a car dealership say that to me on a Sunday. Okay. Sure thing, boss. I'll skip the authority one. That's too much of a zinger. Show of hands. Who here has met a salesperson who didn't at least attempt, key operator there, attempt to appear likable? There's plenty of unlikable salespeople. I mean, let's face that. But they at least attempt. They're going to try to mimic you. I played this game like 2 jobs ago. There was this company, they always wanted to sell us a bunch of stuff that we didn't need. And he was always adamant about, oh, let's go to lunch and talk about it. And I talked to my boss. I was like, I don't want to buy anything from this dude. I don't even like this dude. I don't want to go to lunch with him. I'd rather just stay here and eat a peanut butter sandwich. He's like, no, just go ahead. It's free lunch. And it was at a pretty good seafood place. So I tested the waters with him. I went in there and I ordered something like ultra greasy and fatty. And I was like, yeah, America. The next time I go, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to watch my figure. I'm following the paleo-ketogenic diet. So I order something like really healthy. So does this dude. The next time we go back, here comes the gator tail and the fried everything again. Same thing. Like, they try to mirror you to try to be similar to you to come across as likable. It's building rapport. Social proof. You go to the car dealership looking to buy a Volkswagen Passat, and they try to point you at the Z4 Roadster, telling you how successful men your age are driving this car. Yep, you might be right. I want that, not that. Sorry. If I wanted that, I would have been talking about that. No. Actually, the last time I bought a car, which was fairly recently, somebody tried that. So to make them feel like absolute garbage, I pulled out pictures from when I flipped my RX-8 4 times with the caved-in roof. I walked away from it, so I mean, I'll make fun of it all day. I was like, this is why I don't drive in convertibles or two-seaters. They're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? I was like, I had like 18 sockets put in my back. You wouldn't believe the firewall ports associated with this thing. I couldn't keep a straight face, but then I was like, these are actual pictures from my wreck, but I'm totally fine. I walked away. I got bored in the hospital and started doing Ric Flair impressions, taking selfies, so. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. That may have been the pain meds, I don't know, or the adrenaline. Commitment, consistency. You have consistently bought from me. I have consistently taken care of you. I'm committed to making sure you are successful, even if it takes food off my children's table. I love it when car salesmen say that, food off the kid's table. Because I fire back, hey, you know, sorry. I mean, I totally understand that. But if you're in a career where you can't afford this, maybe you should look at a second job or another career. Just saying. No one's forcing you to work here. Reciprocity. You pay this extra $500 for this car, I'll take you out to a steak dinner. Yeah? Do I get to pick? I like Fleming's. I've never been to Morton's. Can we go to Morton's? I'll make it worth my while. Yeah, totally. And then that drives me to authority. So the same punk car dealership in Georgia that told me about the guy that went down the street on a Sunday to get financing, they didn't want to show me an itemized list on the car I was looking to buy. They showed me a price, and it was like $3,000 more than the internet price. I was like, I've already given you my email address and too much information, so you're going to have to cough something up. They're like, well, we don't show itemized lists. I'm like, well, I'm not going to show you my finance paperwork. They're like, well, we don't do that. I'm like, well, if you don't, I'm going to be calling the state attorney general because what you're doing is unethical. They're like, you're not allowed to call them. Only lawyers can. I'm like, how do you know I don't have my JD? I don't even know what a JD are. Are you talking about Jack Daniels? I'm like, no, a Juris Doctorate. He's like, I don't have a JD. I'm not going to misrepresent that. I don't have one, but he didn't need to know that for that moment. So then, here they come with this list, the itemized list. Okay, there's Gap. I literally, at the time, it was like less than a week after I'd flipped the RX-8, so I was like, yeah, I definitely need Gap. Okay, cool. And then I see a warranty on there, and I'm like, I don't want this warranty. They're like, well, it comes with the car. I'm like, this is a Ford dealership trying to sell me a Volkswagen. They're like, it's a state law that you buy this warranty. I'm like, oh, okay. Can you give me the statute code or the name of the law? They're like, no, it's not published. Yeah. You know what happens when Donald Duck gets mad and he's all like angry about stuff? Imagine that with a potty mouth. Yeah, it was flowing pretty good that day. I walked out, never to return. Every time I drove by there until I moved from the state of Georgia, I'd stick my hand out the window and show them that they are number one. If I could drive and do it, I probably would have mooned them. Anyway, so looking at the actual attack vectors, as many of you know, this is Jason Street. Jason Street is infamous for doing this kind of shenanigans, which would be things like, I've really got to pee. I need to get into your facility. And then he typically he really does have to pee. He drinks a lot of Diet Pepsi to get ready for this. And then he has to go pee, and then he'll do his thing, and then he goes and plugs in these nice little thumb drive looking doohickeys, which I happen to have one right here without the case on it. This is actually a rubber ducky. Unlike a regular USB device, there's a computer right here that accepts what's called Ducky code, which will actually insert keystrokes. And that's what this is doing. He usually stops at the point of a proof of concept, like I've plugged this in, I've done it, might get a shell to come back and say, yeah, okay, this is quantitative proof. There's a couple seats up here if y'all want them. But quantitative proof that it was plugged in. Okay, cool. So what's the next step? There's one in that row and one up here. So for this type of attack, here's what you need. And I put paid tools, but I mean, you might have some of this stuff already. We have a thumb drive and an external hard drive on the top left and bottom right. The bottom left is a bash bunny, and then that is the rubber ducky on the top right. You don't have to use those, but there are use cases where you want to use those. Other tools you may need, of course, you're going to need a computer. I'm a huge fan of FTK Imager Lite for Windows memory acquisition. You can also use Recall, which is basically volatility, rewritten, well, originally it was forked code, now it's maintained by Google. It's part of Google Rapid Response. Sorry to get into the IR world on you, but you could use it as well. There's Lime, other tools that you could use for various platforms. But you're going to use that for memory acquisition, and then for the actual memory analysis, volatility. If you use Recall to acquire the memory, you can use Recall to analyze it as well. In my experience, I think volatility has more plugins, and in my opinion, it's a little bit easier to use. So here we go with the process. We got to gain access. What are we going to do to gain access? Well, we've got all these like really cool badges, like the one I have here that says I'm the state password inspector. So I've got to get in and inspect some passwords. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Get in ever how you get in. Just make sure it's within the confines of the contract or whatever you're doing. Don't do anything illegal. For me, like if I'm doing a social engineering engagement and they want me to come on site and sneak into something, my first response is, do you have armed guards? If the answer is yes, then my answer is no. I could wear Kevlar, but Kevlar doesn't do anything up here. So, yeah, nope, good. Okay, anyway, then you get in. You impersonate a forensic consultant once you're in. So you might come in dressed like a janitor, hop out of your coveralls, and now you're in a suit or a shirt that might just happen to say, I don't know, FireEye, or Mandiant, or CrowdStrike, or SecureWorks, or whoever. Doesn't matter. There's a reason why I'm not doing all that stuff, because, I mean, I'm not about to tempt those waters, but if it's part of an engagement, you're not going to get in trouble for it. You could even go as far, nothing on Vistaprint is going to ensure that you're an employee of FireEye before you get business cards printed, if you want to go that route. I don't think Jerry working at Office Max is going to care either. And even if he does, unless he asks for an employee ID, you're going to be able to BS that easily. Oh, yeah, I'm a forensic consultant, you know, I get called around the world, you know, and then he'll be like, oh, where's the coolest place you've been? Oh, I got to go to Bulgaria. I've never been to Bulgaria. But Jerry doesn't need to know that. Either way, you impersonate the forensic consultant, and I would specifically phrase it something to the effect of, I'm a forensic consultant with company X. Hand over a business card, have your fake badge on, have your polo or t-shirt, probably a polo, with your slacks, you know, play the part, have your backpack or your briefcase. Your company has experienced malicious traffic. There's a few hosts on the network that are infected. We don't believe yours is. You've done nothing wrong, but 2 of the infected hosts have been communicating with your hosts. We need to verify this. So I need to take a memory image so that I can take it back to my lab and analyze it just to make sure so that everything's safe. All it's going to take is, you know, a little bit of time. Now, that's when you're going to do your rapport building. You get the image, and then as you're acquiring the image, you have to be able to entertain this person the whole time. You want to keep them at their desk while you're doing it, though. You don't want them going around, because then they're going to say something to somebody, and it's just going to become a game. Everybody's going to know about it. And next thing you know, corporate security is going to come up and be like, hey, come here. Oh, you talking to me? Oh, sorry. But at the same time, you can also poke around other things that are useful while it's gathering. Here's what we don't want to be. South Park's underpants gnomes. Step 1, gain access. Step 2, step 3, pwnage, right? We've got to figure out what step 2 is. Step 2 in this case would be getting that memory image, getting out the building undetected, and then conducting your offsite analysis as part of the bigger attack. So once we do this, once we get the pwnage, once we've got the image, we'll get the thumb drive, connect it to SIFT or Kali. Both of them have volatility installed by default. I will say that Kali has fewer plugins. Not to say they're useless, not to say you can't add more if you want to use Kali, but SIFT already has it, so I'm lazy, I'll be honest. I'm really lazy. Then you use the appropriate volatility modules, and then depending on which version of Windows, some pwnage. For additional information about gaining access, here's a little bit of stuff you could do. Vistaprint, you want an ID card? Go on Instagram. The students of my OSINT course this morning can probably tell you all about certain Fortune 1 company's Instagram account and all the access cards that we saw. Get a picture of what one looks like. QuickIDcard.com. It's in the mail. Alternatively, all of my fake badges here were made by Skydog out of Nashville, so if you can run into him at a conference, he'll make one for you too. Always have a clipboard. People don't question people with clipboards. I mean, they just don't. Have a laptop or briefcase. If you're carrying a backpack, you could even hide some of these in it, which this is an Alpha network card. That one is both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. You could also play with one of these. It works really well if you mix it with bananas for a cyber pina colada. In other words, it's a Wi-Fi pineapple. Very, very sweet. But anyway, you could put that in a backpack and carry it, and none the wiser. You're going to have a battery pack for it or something, have it plugged into a computer or a Raspberry Pi or something, but they're not going to see it if it's in a backpack. I mean, don't be like the people you see at DEF CON with the antennas hanging out their backpack. I mean, you're not showing them off. It's not the Wi-Fi cactus. You're trying to be under the radar. And to make sure you have a solid pretext. So I've been told not to say who this really is, but they're in the room. It just happens. He may have just outed himself. But, you got it. So with this, rubber ducky versus a regular USB device. If you know for a fact they're using DLP software, you're probably going to want to use the Ducky. And I'll say this because this is public knowledge, IBM outlawed the use of thumb drives. If you're going to go that route, if you were going to try to do it something like that for a similar company, don't do it to IBM, please. You're going to need to use a Ducky because it doesn't register as a thumb drive. It registers as a keyboard. So use that. If there's an opportunity for privilege escalation using something like PowerUp or some of the other tools, by all means go for it. If you have an exploit, you know something's already there, have at it. But that was one of the preconceived notions I had going into this talk that really opened my eyes to things in terms of C# compiled stuff. So anyway, then you get your FTK imager, and this is where it becomes complicated because you have to have admin to run FTK imager. So if you don't have admin, you're not going to be able to get your memory image. So you want to target someone that has local admin or find a way to get that person to get someone else to put in their creds. If that's too risky for you, I've got another script that's on the GitHub I'll share with you at the end that will actually steal the Wi-Fi username or the Wi-Fi SID and password. So that'll work, and that does not require admin. So that's another vector in. You can sniff out other stuff once you're on the wireless network. So get your image. If you can, walk out the door. If you're using the rubber ducky, you'll have to be able to write some stuff in Ducky code. It's a little bit complicated to learn in the beginning, but it's not that bad. And then you need to change the firmware on it to Twin Ducky so that you can actually run it as both an HID device and the thumb drive. So that way you can actually move the file, whether it's the memory image or the file that's just writing your Wi-Fi credentials to it. You need to be able to move it to the thumb drive and get it off. And then you can also store FTK imager on it when you're working your way in. So with this, you're going to have to have some OSINT. You need to know about the people. You need to know about the culture of the people. How likely are they to believe this story? Windows, Unix, or Mac? I moved to a MacBook Pro in December. I now have to carry 2 other bags because of dongles. So if you're going to go after a Mac, you're going to need a plethora of dongles to be able to actually do this, because everything on this is USB-C. If you deal with some of the older Macs, they have some of the other protocols. You need to be able to convert that to USB, back and forth, whatever. And then also know of any limitations associated with this. is it known whether they use DLP software? Because if you know for a fact that they do and you don't have a Ducky, why are you doing it? I mean, you might be able to get some stuff, but you're setting yourself up for quite a bit of disaster. Test your stuff. If you know which AV they use, test it at home, test it wherever you can, because the worst thing you can do is set off antivirus, because that's, in theory, a one-way ticket to the SOC finding out what you're doing and getting shut down quick. With the user rights, again, local admin, and then the culture, it's something to consider. This slide actually is supposed to say minutes instead of hours at the bottom. It's basically 2 to 2.25 times the size of the drive in minutes. So for a 2 gig drive, it was about 4.5 minutes. For 12 gig, it was just under 26. So that's time you're going to have to be able to entertain this person whose computer you're on. So be charismatic, be likable, be approachable, take some candy. I mean, people like candy, unless they're diabetic, so might want to have some sugar-free too, just in case. When someone's trying to build a rapport with me and they offer me candy, I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm diabetic. Like, I legitimately am, but I don't care. I had 2 donuts and 2 Monsters for breakfast. I'm good. But anyway, you need to know about the user's privs for that whole admin thing, and the vulnerability management posture. If they've got garbage vulnerability management, you might just be able to get a good privilege escalation. If they patch within less than a week, you've got a very short window. And it is what it is. So now we've hit a demo period. So for the demo period, well, there we go. Here's what I was looking for. So this is running power up. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is power up. It's on a clean host. So it's on a very clean Windows VM. Nothing's installed, no processes, anything. It's just showing the execution, everything it's going to go through. It's pretty quick. I sped all this stuff up for the sake of having quick demos, but it's just showing a couple of things that you might be able to work with. Not very much. So that's on a clean host. On a dirtier host, we have this. It's going to be the same process. And now there's a bunch of unquoted service paths that we have from having things installed, some registry stuff to work with, several vectors. So we have that. And then for FTK Imager, it's really simple to capture the image. So this I've got it on Leg4Co, which is short for Legitimate Forensics Company. It's just a regular thumb drive. This is just it doing the capture, the steps to go through. You just say capture and you're off to the races. So there we have it. There's the captures, the files. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind. If you don't want to target like ultra privileged users, video editors, anyone that's going to have like a boatload of RAM, because you don't want to have to sit there while you capture 64 gigs of RAM, because you're going to need at least 64 gigs of space and 2 to 2.5 times in minutes. So you're talking about 2 to 3 hours sitting there waiting. So keep that in mind. And there we have that. So we're back to this. So within Volatility, it's an open source memory forensics tool. Again, it's the same as Recall, where it used to be. They've split. It's native to both SIFT and Kali. You can install it on any host you want as well. I like to do these variables to make life easier. And yes, those are 3 slashes in the file path. That's just the way it's set up. But if you do this, then you don't have to define it every time you run Volatility. Otherwise, you have to say -F for the image and then -- profile equals for this. So by doing this, that cuts that step out of each one. So some modules that are useful for the attack perspective. What can we do with hashes? If only I had someone to pass them to. Mimikatz, we know what Mimikatz does, right? So we've got that route. We have Chrome and Firefox. We can look at browser history. That's going to give you a glimpse into the culture of the organization. NetScan is pretty much the same as running netstat minus AN. So now you see what that's connected to, what's connected to it. We can take screenshots. We can see what's been entered on the command line via command scan and things like that. We can dump certs. So many different things we can do. We can even dump it into a timeline and look and see exactly what's happened in memory over time, basically since the last reboot. So a lot of stuff that we can do with this, because you can spoof a lot of things, but what is in memory is truth. So limitations. FTK Imager Lite only works with Windows. You've got Recall with Mac. Linux has Lime. Through this research, Windows 10 is a pain. It is brutal, as it is right now, to conduct forensic analysis with volatility. There's still some things you can get, but not quite as much. Windows 7, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose with a straw. I've not tested it with Mac or Linux. There are plugins for both. I've not tested anything out. And of course, it's going to take time. But the cool thing about the time that it's going to take is after you've got that memory image, who cares how much time it takes, because you're in your evil lair. I mean, you're wearing your black hoodie, listening to your EDM with the lights off, having all the Mountain Dew, Cheetos, Doritos, whatever you want. Maybe some Red Bull too. So, I mean, with this, I mean, we can run volatility fairly simply as well. So, like, here's an example of Windows 7 memory analysis. This was taken in SIFT, as you can tell from the background, but basically, I fat-fingered some stuff. So, just getting everything there. So let me move this. There we go. So it's just being able to do that. So there's Mimikatz. There's some passwords we see. Right there's their network connections. Here's everything that was put in on the command line. So right here. Get SID, so we can look at some users, determine which users we want to target for further analysis. About to dump some DLLs so we can find opportunities for hijacking for that. Maybe some process hollowing opportunities if you want to go that sophisticated. Just working through it. Now we're going to dump the certs. So there's all those. So we might be able to do some malicious stuff with that. There's the certs, all that fun stuff. So that was a Windows 7 box. Here's a Windows 10 system. You're going to see that the outcome is vastly different. For whatever reason, when I recorded this, I totally forgot how to type. So right here, that the profile equals Windows 10 x64 underscore. While you're waiting on that memory image to capture, open up System and find out which version of Windows 10 it is, because you're going to need to know that. There's a module within Volatility called Image Info that will collect it for you, but it takes a long time. That's something you want to do right as you're going home for the day, and you're going to hope that it's done by the time you get back, assuming your computer doesn't go to sleep and stop it. So there, Mimikatz, nothing for hashes. We are seeing some network stuff, so that's what's connected to the network. In this case, there was almost nothing because it was just a VM I stood up for this. Nothing from the command line. Here's all the processes. So you have PS list, PS scan, PS tree, and PS info. That will actually show you everything. So this is just showing the processes that's running. Just going to get the user, same thing there. DLLs, we're having a little bit more luck with those. But things that would actually target the accounts that we could have immediate gratification, like Mimikatz and hash dump and command scan, they're not jiving. But from a defensive perspective, that's actually really good. From we're trying to pwn the galaxy It's terrible. But it is more or less what it is. So as this finishes up, all right. All right, so with this, now we're going to move into another perspective, understanding that we can do this with memory, but why don't we hear social engineers talking more about rogue Wi-Fi access points or pineapples or something along those lines? If you're already gaining access, it's just icing on the cake. So why do we do it? Well, because people will connect to it, inevitably. How do we do it? Well, you can do it with a Wi-Fi pineapple. You'll need an alpha network card to go with that as well to be able to put the data through if you want them to actually connect to anything. Or you can just use an alpha network card and use Airbase NG. But even cracking the Wi-Fi itself is not hard. And I mean, here I've got a demo for that part. Actually, here, let me show you the demo for stealing the Wi-Fi with the rubber ducky. So I just call this Wi-Fi stealer. So I've plugged in the ducky. There it starts to execute its stuff. It's doing its thing. It closed it. There's the file. I called it forensic data, and right there we see the let's talk about Hex Baby wireless network, and that the password in, if you translate from hex, spells FACEB. I always try to spell Facebook instead of dead beef or dead BIOS or something. But anyway, it's that simple. It's basically a one-liner. But going into the Wi-Fi side of things, for Wi-Fi cracking, I mean, this is in Cali, it's really not that difficult. And I completely overcomplicated this process, but I just showed a few other things that you could do, and I really should have made that font bigger. I apologize. So right here we've got AirDump working, or AeroDump working, which is basically a wireless packet sniffer. It's just picking up everything. So now we've honed it in to where it's we're focusing on one BSSID, which would be the router based on the MAC address. So now we're doing various types of attacks. That was a fake authentication attack to connect to that router. Now we're doing some deauthentication. It's always fun if you have a neighbor that annoys you. You could always deauth their network and then go to dinner. Give them a denial of service if you want. So here we have this client, so we're going to spoof this client and see what's going on with that. So what we're trying to do there is when we see pound data, we're trying to get that count to go up. And as the number goes up, ultimately what we're doing is we're capturing initialization vectors, which is basically the key exchange. So what we're trying to do is capture enough stuff that we can ultimately run a known plain text attack of sorts. It's more complicated than that, but that's the most simplest explanation. So we got some more stuff going here. The data count's starting to go up. So every time it disconnects and reconnects, same thing. There we go. And then with this, we are going to write it to a file. With that written file, we're going to drop that in aircrack.ng, give it a list. This is super fast forwarded, but it took 29 minutes and 12 seconds, and the password was scoop2009, which is a 9-character password with 3 typefaces, which is compliant for most organizations, but it is also included within rocku.txt, which is one of the largest default lists. So it's a compliant password out of a list, 29 minutes. So I guess the key takeaway for that would be, the key takeaway would simply be that with your wireless networks, any other authentication you can use, whether it be two-factor authentication or very strong high-entropy complex passwords, will be in your favor. Don't use crap off a list. So shifting gears, Through the Hacking Glass, it's a project that Brian Austin and I co-founded. Basically, it's a mentorship project. We're trying to bridge the gap to to help people get experience that they can't get in academia or they can't get in with certifications. We're trying to help people that have 9 years of Ethereum experience get those entry-level help desk jobs that everybody's looking for. If you get the joke with the whole 9 years experience with Ethereum. But basically, we're trying to partner with vendors to get like not for resale licenses so people can actually become evangelists for the products as well. We're not allowing them to sell to the mentees or the mentors, but basically they're allowed to test and learn things that way. So we're gonna have to do it in cohorts because right now I think the ratio is 27-1 for mentees to mentors. So if you think you can mentor someone on something, definitely join. You can be a mentor and a mentee, so no big deal. Here's my upcoming speaking engagements. Colonel Con, B-Sides Kansas City. If you like social engineering, at B-Sides Kansas City during lunch, the organizer has been getting calls from the Microsofts. I'm going to call them back and toy with them during lunch, so that should be fun. And beyond that, that's about it. Hacker Halted will be in October, so if you want free tickets to Hacker Halted, just follow me on social media. As soon as I get my coupon codes, I'll be blasting those out, spamming everybody's timelines. But with that being said, questions. I've got the links to other stuff on the preceding slide, so I just want to open it for questions while we work through that. Questions, concerns, complaints, grievances, anything? Cool. So here's the links associated with stuff. So Windows PrivS check, PowerShell suite, exploit suggester, all those are pretty good. For this, I have script repos for that. Right now, the only one I have on it is Wi-Fi Stealer, which is the one I used here. But if you have a rubber ducky, you can run it that way as well. So, sure. With these, I think so. I'm not sure. What's that? If I publish it, it'll probably be SlideShare. I'll probably post the link to Twitter, yeah. So typically SlideShare. And if there are no questions, concerns, complaints, grievances, or anything else, that's all, folks.